Welcome to the Whole Enchilada, a community of high achievers that fight the status quo, rebel against mediocrity, and make life happen. Let's go.
Enchilada Nation, super excited about our conversation today. Not only am I excited about having an incredible guest on, she happens to be one of my business partners in several of our ventures. We've been in business together for several years, but she's also one of my closest friends. She's been on the show before, and I'm excited to have her back as a guest today. The one, the only, Russie Edwards. So thank you for being back on the show.
Hi, thanks for having me back.
It's nice of you to actually agree to be back on the show, because I know you see it all the time. You see the guests I have on, so the fact that you'd be willing to be on the show again is like a compliment. So thank you.
Big fan.
Big fan. Big fan of you or a big fan of me?
Mostly me when I'm on it, but also big fan of you and your guests.
Good. Well, I think we're gonna have an interesting conversation today. Because I think one of the things that makes us great business partners is not very many people can match my crazy weird pace of go, which I think has been one of my greatest assets as a business person, but I think you know better than anybody, sometimes it works against me, and I drive some people crazy. So thank you for being patient with me through that. So before we jump into this conversation though, what else, just because our community knows from you being on the show before that you're an incredible business partner, you're an incredible businesswoman. What should they know outside of that before we jump into the business conversation?
So I would say outside of the world that I live in our business world, is I'm a mom. I have 3 kids. I have 2 dogs. I'm married, and we live in Davis County, Utah, and I like to travel. I'm a Gemini. I don't know what else you want to know about me.
I think that's good. I think they're going to learn more about you as we're chatting.
I think so. I've been in the real estate industry for 17 years. So I mean, that's weird because I know I look so young, but for 17 years in, and just, I'm really passionate about it.
And how many years?
In a lot of areas of my community. And
how many years now has it been that we've been in business together?
So I think we're at 8 years.
8 years?
Mm-hmm.
Holy smokes! Thank you for not ditching out on me yet.
I think sometimes it's a miracle that we haven't fired each other.
We're 10% into our business working relationship then.
Perfect.
No, that's I can't believe it's been 8 years already. We've grown a lot together.
We have.
And it's amazing we haven't killed each other yet in some ways. So here is what I want to chat about today, and we can take it wherever.
Okay.
How we were having a conversation a couple of weeks ago about leadership and a couple other things. And I think there is a term that we've both been called a couple times that can sound a little rude if under certain circumstances.
Right.
However, it's hard to get mad about it because there's some truth to it.
Right.
And it's impatient. It's weird because I don't feel like I'm an impatient person. I feel like people aren't fast enough around me, and so they're calling me impatient because I can't go at my pace. But that's bad leadership. So I got to slow down and be like, if people are consistently saying I'm impatient or I need to be more patient, what do I need to learn from that?
Right.
Is this resonating at all with you? Have you been called impatient?
Yeah, for sure. The reason I'm laughing is because in my head, I think the same thing. I'm like, I'm not being impatient, just like move at a faster pace.
Yeah.
Right? I think it's important to kind of go back a little bit on like where this conversation came from though.
Yeah, let's do it.
Because to me, I appreciate a lot the type of leader that you are, that this started from some areas that you're working on to grow as a leader.
Yep.
And you mentioned the impatient piece. And while it is some ways, like you said, one of your greatest assets because it keeps things constantly moving.
Yeah.
At times, it can be a little bit like a little tornadoes rolling through, and there's some impatient pieces that get like thrown away behind it. And so when we were talking through that, I was like, yes, I agree with you, and I think this is like something we should pack and like unpack a little bit.
Yeah. No, I think it's interesting that you like compare it to a tornado, because a lot of times, yes, a tornado can be very destructive, but then it's what we talk about a lot of times is the aftermath of the tornado. Like what was the effect of the tornado? And I feel like that's sometimes where I finally look at where being impatient is showing up wrong. It's kind of what's the aftermath of it, where maybe I get a little disconnected with people if they're not keeping up on the pace, or I get frustrated that the results aren't showing up fast enough. So like if by exercising better patience up front, would there be less of a path of destruction behind me in some ways, you know? And so here's where you're like, yes. And so here's what I think would be interesting to start the conversation, because I believe a lot of people aren't urgent enough.
Right.
And I think I like to think in opposites to try to understand something. So if I think of impatient, and what would be the opposite of that is being really, you'd think patient first, but I don't think in this scenario those are the antonyms. I think the antonyms in my mind are, I'm being urgent. I'm trying to get things pushed through quickly. It's not that I'm impatient in actively pushing things forward. I like to be urgent. I like to be. I'd rather have 80% of a business plan and go hard than wait till I have 100% of the business plan and be too late to the table.
Yeah.
And it's like this weird balance of how do you know when to be urgent and when to sit back on your heels for a minute and be a little bit more patient because of the aftermath you're leaving.
Right. I mean, I think we see this a lot in our industry, right? Because there's so many people that they want to study and study and study and study and study. And by the time they have this perfect play written or this perfect business plan or whatever, you've missed the opportunity or you've missed the boat. And now you're trying to solve a problem that was a problem a year ago, and you perfected it and perfected it and perfected it. And because there wasn't urgency behind your strategy shifts or whatever it was, now you're left behind. And so I think it's a fine line. And I think that the thing for me with patience is like, what are the controllables in being impatient and what aren't?
Yeah.
Right? Because I think there's also something to be said for creating urgency and doing it in a way that people around you don't feel affected by you being impatient. It's not just like, oh, Marcus is just impatient, not getting it done. It's like, help them understand the urgency and where you're coming from on it. So that's some of the things you can control within the
I think you bring up a really important point, because I like that you use the term create urgency, because I think a lot of times by the time I'm meeting with the team, I mean, you and I have so many strategic conversations up front, but by the time I go meet with the team, I'm already in urgent mode because I've already done the calculated thought process. In my mind, I've already slowed down and thought through it to the point where I'm like, now I know what we should be doing. And as you say that, I'm not passing on the urgency to the team because I'm already in go mode, maybe. So how do you one, am I on the right thought process there from what you're saying? And then two, how do you actually create urgency for someone else?
So yeah, I think you're on the right thought process, right? I think you're going down the right path with that. And I do think that that's, to be fair to you, because I always laugh like, oh my gosh, like, calm down. Like, you're just so impatient, right? And I am as well.
Yeah.
And I think you've probably said something similar to me. And I think that that you have to create the urgency, right? So I think you're going down the right path for sure. To me, I think sometimes, like you said, we're so involved in a conversation by the time we're to a place that we're like, okay, let's introduce this to the team, and then we've got to move, right? And we have spent time on the back end thinking about things. So I think sometimes it's slowing down enough at the very beginning of the conversation to really lay down the vision and the timelines and the urgency behind it. Versus, because sometimes when we're talking to people and we're getting impatient with how the result is showing up, it's because we're already moving, like we're solving the next problem, and this one still is just kind of lingering, right? So I think it's taking the time maybe to slow down enough on not just the timelines, but the vision a little bit of, hey, here's why it's an urgent situation, that we get it to this place by this time.
Yeah, as I'm thinking through that, like, again, like one of the things I've really appreciated about working with you is we really slow down to strategize, and I know that we can walk into a meeting and immediately get into it and go, but there's a very clear pattern to our strategy to get to a point where we can both be very clear on the action items and go. And I think that 8 years of working together, I think we've kind of fallen into that pace with each other, and I'm trying to remember back to like our first year of working together, if it was just that we're both wired that way and we were able to fall into that pattern quickly, or did it take time for us to develop this pattern of knowing how each other works and being able to fall right into that push that we just, like, this kind of our magic sauce of like pushing our organizations forward, if that makes sense.
I think first of all, we are wired pretty similarly in ways, right? Like, I don't think either one of us like to just kind of sit idly and wait for the grass to grow. So I think maybe that's part of it. And then I think it's funny because one time I was like clearing out notes on my phone or something, and I looked back to like little tiny baby like co-team leader at the office and my notes that I had for you. And it's funny because there wasn't a lot around like, it was more just like specific scenario, but like our strategy, I think we always have been good at really just kind of laying out what we wanted, like where we were trying to go. And so sometimes it was just more like, what are the little hiccups or rough edges that I'm running into, and how would you handle it, as I was growing as a leader and you had already been in that position. And so I think that it's maybe a combination of both. You know, like kind of being wired similarly, and then also I think anytime, and I know this, I only know my own world, right? But anytime that we're juggling a lot of things, or we have a lot of pieces and we have a lot of businesses together, and so a lot of different businesses that we're working through, you just don't have the luxury of a lot of time sometimes to push things through, because again, you really have to be strategizing for the next problem while this problem's already being solved, right? And so I think sometimes it's just the luxury of not having that luxury of being really patient and slow paced to get things to the next level. But that can drive people crazy. It can,
and I do think that one of the, and we've both done this for each other, I think, and the reason I want to illustrate this is for our listeners that are listening to this, is like how important it is to have people in your world that know when to push you,
for sure,
but also that you have, and it may be the same person, that have the moment to slow you down. And I think that's one thing I've always appreciated about you is, you know, we have our weekly scheduled calls.
Right.
We have our emergency calls, right?
911.
And then we have our ongoing texts of just like little things we're taking care of. But I know there's several times we get on our weekly scheduled call, and even though it's Zoom most of the time, we're not in person most of the time. We just have the ability to like one of us will jump in, like we need to do this, and the other one recognizes like, hey, are you okay? Is your family okay? And there's a lot of times that we can jump right in, because that's one of the things, because I'm impatient, one of the things that drives me nuts is every time we get together, we don't have to go through the whole list of, because I do care about your family, but we don't need to talk about them every single time, and you don't have to ask me about mine because we're talking frequently enough. But it seems like and I don't know what the cue is. For me, the cue is I know how to read your energy of when you need to slow down. It's not something you say, it's just something of like, hey, are things okay? Is there anything going on outside of work that we need to talk through, or that you need support with, or do you need some time off? And I think that goes back and forth. That's interesting. It's not very often that we both show up that way at the same time, that we both need a therapy session. But any thoughts on that, on the importance of having somebody in your world that knows when to push, but also knows you enough to when to say, hey, let's sit back for a minute?
I mean, I think it's critical, right? And I think it's critical to have people that are in your world that know that and can help you see that and can push on you. And also there's got to be that element of trust, right?
For sure.
And also to be the same people who can call you. Like, there's been times where I've called you and I've said, hey, I need to talk to my friend Marcus, and this is your friend Russie. And there's some things that I think you need to slow down on. Take some time, right? And you've done the same thing for me. And I think it's important to have that, recognize that in the people that trust us to lead as well, right? Like recognizing the times that we really do need to push. Because everybody's wired so differently, and sometimes people really need kind of that push and that, and learning when to kind of like soften it a little bit and say, okay, for me, what I kind of try to look at is, am I being unrealistic with what I'm asking? Because what I have learned is not everybody lives inside my brain, thank goodness. And also I'm pretty high capacity, right? Like I can just bring it, I'll take it. And I'm pretty high capacity, and not everybody is. And so I've learned that I have to go, is this unreasonable what I'm asking? And are they reasonable or unreasonable deadlines? And does this person in this position, or this person that's asking me for help with this, is this realistic for their reality? Are they at capacity? Are they my capacity or their capacity, right? So I think that it's important to it's important to have those people in your world that can say you got to push harder in this. I know you've got it in
Yeah.
you. And the people who can go, are you at capacity and do you need to do something to take care of you so that you can go to the next level, right?
Yeah,
Because I think
good
that's
points.
an important piece right now.
Yeah, and I think that as you're saying this, I mean, you're nailing some really important points with this.
It's not really surprising. Just kidding.
I mean, one of the things that I love most about the organizations that we're building is the people we get to lead. Like, we have so many just
Amazing people.
really cool,
Yeah.
like just not only like good workers, like they're good at their jobs, but they're just amazing human beings, right? And I mean, one of the things that I feel like we've both developed in our leadership over time is we know it's about people. I think our people know that we care for them, right? In fact, I had a conversation with one of the people in our organization today, and she said to me, I've never questioned your care for our organization. And that actually meant a lot to me that she would say that, because she's seen me at my best, and she's seen me at the push worst, you know? As I'm thinking about that, I think the majority of time, I hope that our people feel that way, that we're showing up that way for them. I know for sure that they feel that way about you. But I feel like when I find myself in these stressful situations where I feel overwhelmed with the number of tasks that I need to get done, or the number of people that are counting on me, is when I tend to slip a little bit on, it's not that I care less about the people, it's that I've almost like narrowed my focus to a push instead of being aware of the people around us. And I feel like that's sometimes where I leave our people maybe rubbed the wrong way. Hopefully I've done enough to earn a little grace from them, but which should never give me permission to like rub them the wrong way. But like, how do you manage? I mean, business is hard. Business is stressful. How do you manage like being able to manage like the stress and energy of that, and still be able to like slow down and be the leader you need to be for your people? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh gosh, that's a hard one, just because I don't know. I think it's a work in progress all the time, right? To me, I think there are those moments where it's being able to read a room and being aware of the energy, right? And going back to, am I pushing them beyond their capacity because I want them to have a different type of capacity? Is it pushing them to a new level? And sometimes it's like, there's been times that you and I, like, we talked about our weekly calls, right? And I remember in the beginning of those weekly calls, there always was kind of a chit chat. And then we kind of got to the point where it was like, hey, are we okay just to dive right into today? Because we have so much to cover. And I think really with the people that we lead and the people that are in our organizations and our partners in our organizations, being able to have almost that kind of similar, like, hey, you know, I care about you all the time. We're up against some deadlines, or we've got some things that we've got to get done now. Is it okay if we just dive right in and focus on how do we get this to the finish line? So I think it's a little bit of having that trust, the upfront belief in what we're doing together. And then helping people see the vision of where we're going, so that they see where their piece is really important, right? Because again, I think a lot of times there's so much strategizing behind the scenes, and we think we've got it all figured out, right? And then we're bringing everybody in that plays such a critical role in whatever we're pushing forward. And I think sometimes for us to speed up and be able to have that permission to go, hey, let's just dive right in, and we're gonna all move fast and quick today, and we just got to push this really hard. It just takes that like slowing down a little bit, and they know that you care about them, and it's seeing the vision and going, I get it, why we've got to move so quickly on those things.
If you are enjoying this conversation, please, who do you know that you can share this episode with today that will find value in it and would also like to join us on our journey to become the best version of ourselves? And don't forget, please like and subscribe, because this helps me get in front of more people just like you to continue to grow our network and our Enchilada Nation. Thanks again, and let's get back to the episode. No, I think you nailed that, because I read it was a fun little poem, and if I was smart, I would recite it to you right now, but I don't remember what it was. But the whole I'm not even going to try to rhyme, to like make it up.
Look it up, and you could just like link it in the comments.
maybe, but it impacted me a lot. Not enough to memorize it apparently, but enough that I've thought about it a lot. Of basically the premise of it was, have your people forgot the whole purpose why they're gathering wood when you sent them out to gather wood to build a ship? And if you even if they knew they were gathering wood to build a ship, and you were like, we need the wood, we need the wood, we need to build the ship. Do they remember where we're going? Like once the ship is built, do they remember why we're even building the ship and what the destination would be and what that means for them?
Yeah.
And
something like, did you get so busy gathering the wood
Yeah.
that you forgot where the ship was?
yeah,
headed?
something like that. I'm going to look it up. I'm going to memorize it.
I just, so you know, I totally ripped that off from you, and
Oh.
I used it in a class not that long ago.
Did you say Marcus
I
Green
did
wrote
actually.
a poem?
Well, I didn't say you wrote a poem, but I said, my friend Marcus told me this concept.
But it's stuck a lot with
really
me
true.
because I feel like sometimes we talk at length where we're going and what we're trying to build, and by the time it feels exhausting to go say that again, right?
Yeah,
But I think you brought up a great point that is where the grace comes in with the team to be like, oh yeah, I remember why we got to go hard right now because I remember where we're going. I want to go there too.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important piece to this whole puzzle is just making sure that we're reiterating to our team members constantly not only where we're going but why it's important to them.
Yeah. Well, and I think that we're in an industry, because all of our stuff is really kind of connected back to the real estate industry, and I think we're in an industry that moves really quick. And so sometimes the vision that we initially, like I feel like there's a lot of shifting happening even right now within, you know, some of the roles that we do and those kind of things. And it's like, well, where we were originally going, that's no longer a valid place. Or that's gone, right?
Yeah.
And now we got to relook at the new piece of the vision.
Yeah.
And how do we, again, like rally the troops around it to say, okay, we all get this. This is the vision that we're in. This is where we're going. This is why we're going there. This is why we shifted strategy.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of times when I get, because I mean, obviously, you know, sometimes I get really impatient with you. And I think you also get very impatient with me.
Yeah.
But I think usually when I find myself getting most frustrated or going, oh my gosh, you're just being really impatient, it's because I'm like, we were going here and I'm working at this pace and all of a sudden something has changed and the urgency has changed. So it's like, slow down.
Yeah.
I need you to help. Like, let's relook at the vision and make sure that we're still going the right way.
Yeah, I think that's important. I mean, you brought up trust earlier is you have to build trust. It actually takes effort to build trust up front so that like even if I came to you and said we need to switch directions, I can't, even though we have years and years and years of building trust with each other, I think we're to a point where you'd be like, all right, let's start shifting the direction, but I still owe you an explanation of why we're doing that.
I wouldn't just do it blindly, right? Like I would just be like, oh, okay, sure.
Yeah.
I mean, be like, whoa, wait, like why are we going this way?
Yeah.
And is this still really, are we on the right track, right? Yeah. But I think you have to have those people in your life too that are going to help you see like, hey, are we going the right way?
Yeah.
Did we get lost somewhere along the way or are we still on the right track? It just looks a little different. The way we're going to get there, it's like I always think of a GPS, right?
Yeah.
And it's like recalculating. Like if you make the wrong turn and your maps, your Siri's like recalculating route, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, we're still headed the right way, but how we had to get there shifted a little bit.
Yeah, agree. So to start thinking of wrapping up the conversation, I want to go here with it because we both have kids.
We do.
And I always have this fear of showing up incorrectly for the people inside of our organizations that know the professional me. But I even have a greater fear of going 100 miles an hour all day long on pushing things and then taking that energy home to where I get to see my little Grace, for example, my youngest, who's now 11. Like, how do I have to catch myself sometimes of like her being like, Dad, come look at my woodsy land, which is how she set up her dolls and stuff, which in the grand scheme of things is really inconsequential to like anything of importance really to like what we're building. But if I'm at that pace, that relation, like the whole point of what I'm doing, everything work-wise is for my family and for the people in our world. And so there's obviously there's been some moments where I have not showed up as a perfect parent that way, and my kids have felt my energy, and it makes me feel horrible when I can tell that they can tell my energy's off. And I've tried to be really good at starting to manage that energy, knowing that I'm coming to the end of the day because I can't fix it in the moment. I need to fix it prior to being in that situation. Do you experience anything like that with your family, and any tips or thoughts on how you show up more present? I don't even want to say patient, but more just present with your family, the way they need you, because a lot of times that's different than the way our organization and our people need you.
For sure, it's totally different, right? Like they need you to show up in a different version.
Yeah.
Like it is. Quite frankly, this is something that is an ongoing challenge for me. Like I'll just
Yeah.
be really vulnerable. It's a challenge for me, right?
Yeah.
Because I am in a situation really all day long. There are people asking me for help, advice, like go. I'm dealing with all different personalities. It's a lot of pressure. I'm making a lot of decisions really all day, and every day looks different, right?
Yeah.
And that's it's a lot of energy, and it's a lot of like raw energy, right? And sometimes you go home and I go home and I'm exhausted sometimes, right? And I remember years ago, my husband said to me, and it seriously was kind of like a punch to the stomach at the time, but he's like, Russie, like you walk through those doors and you are like a freaking storm. Or you just bring such big energy. I can't remember exactly how he worded it. He's like, you walk in the doors and you are just, I bring a big energy with me. And it's like good or bad, like the whole house knows, and you affect everybody in the house.
Yeah.
And that was again, as like hard as that was to hear, it's something that I carried with me, and it's like sits with me sometimes. And it's easy to go down like, well, this, you know, but it's like, I really have to be conscious and aware of it. And I think that's the biggest thing is sitting in it to go. And there are times where I'm like, Riker he's my baby, you know, he's 12, and I'll come in the door and he'll start telling me about something, and it's like I pick up and I'm like, wait, stop, and I like put my phone away and I'm just like, tell me that again. Yeah. I'm sorry, and I've just gotten to the point now where I'm like, but I'm sorry, I wasn't listening. I'm right here now, right?
Yeah, good.
And so I think just recognizing it at the time, and then for me, I really do try to focus on like being present in the moments that they're there, right? Yesterday we were at an event for one of our agents, and Addison came up to me and like put her arms around me. We were just kind of standing there snuggling. And one of the agents is like, how old are you? And she said 18. And she's like, oh, I wish my daughter would still hug me like that. And I'm
cute.
like, I hope she never stops, right? And to me, I'm like, I hope that means I'm doing something right.
Yeah, it does.
And also just kind of looking for the moments to really be present and creating some boundaries around it. And again, this is for me, like full disclosure, just a total work in progress that I'm constantly having to like readdress myself and say like, hey, you don't need your phone in this moment, like be present in the moments that matter. And that, and my family's really good too to understand, like there are times when I'm like, okay, I've got to get this done tonight. And so I'm going to work really hard on this, but I'm getting it done so that this weekend I can just be off. Like this weekend we're going to a music festival, right? And I'm going to be able to just be present with them and have my phone put away. And so I'm just trying to focus on like, how do you make the impact moments count? And be present when you're needed, and just be aware. I mean, I think it's kind of the same thing as like being aware of who needs your energy when, and how you can, like knowing when you can push, and when you've got to just stop everything you're doing and be really present.
I think that's some really good advice. I think that some of the stuff you brought up reminds me of just what I think of as triggers, right? Just because I'm so pattern oriented, I've had to set these triggers for myself to remind myself of certain things, right? Like I remember when my kids were really little in Arizona, I was building a couple businesses and I was going full tilt. And at that time I looked a lot younger, so I wore a tie to work every day for validity, right? But I remember the last thing I would do before I walked in my house at that time is I'd actually take my tie off in my car still before I went in the house as a trigger of like, okay, business Marcus, you're done for the day. It's time to be dead. Because I knew the minute I walked through that door, it was Polly Pockets and piggyback rides and things like that. And that was such an important part of my day. I didn't want to walk in as boss Marcus or businessman Marcus with that energy, because that's clearly not what my kids needed.
Right.
Obviously, my kids are a little bit older now. They need a different energy from me, and sometimes they don't want any energy from me as teenage girls.
Right.
But when they do, they want a different version of me. And for me, a lot of times I control that a lot with breathing exercises now. Or like particularly like with my home office, my whole family know I got this big sliding door on my office that's metal, and it makes this big noise when it opens. And so that's kind of the signal for everyone, like Dad's work day is over, that door's sliding open. And just, they don't know it, but right before I kind of wrap up for the day, I just take a minute and just take a couple deep breaths of like, and in my mind I'm like, all right, breathe in my family, breathe out my work stuff, kind of get rid of that energy. And for some reason that helps me. And sometimes I have to do it in the moment of like when Grace is like, Dad, come look at this. And I have to, okay, let's look at it. Just like you did, kind of like, even anyone watching the video, you saw Russie's body language change when she like imitated talking to Riker of like, hey bud, what, like I'm looking in the eyes, whether your trigger's putting your phone away. I love some of the Apple features now of being able to put on do not disturb, like, because we're just so trained that when our phone buzzes and things, it's like, oh,
paying attention to
I gotta respond to this. I love some of the new features that are coming out that way. Have helped me a lot too.
Yeah.
Any other advice you'd give that way?
No, I just think I love that you had. I've heard you say that before about taking the tie off. I think that sometimes it's like for me, I'll try to like if I'm mid conversation, you know, it's easy to be in the habit of just like I'm gonna walk in, I'm gonna put my bags down, and finishing up wrapping up the call. But just finishing up the call, like there's so many times, like my kids would tell you they open up because where I parked right in front of the door that opens to the garage. Yeah. So I'll see Riker like poke his head out, and then he'll shut it, and then I see Addison like coming in, and she's like, "What you doing? We're gonna eat dinner," you know? And Jed's like, "Dinner? You gonna eat?" Yeah. And I'm like, I'm wrapping up the call because I want to finish it in the garage so that I'm like, okay, same kind of a thing. Yeah. Like I'm walking up these steps and I'm walking into the house, and really I think that the last few years have just moved so quickly that it's made me just so aware of how precious that time and how quick it goes. And I'm trying to just be more present in those moments because the reality is like you could fill your entire life with work. Yeah. And you can be impatient with everyone around you and you'll probably be very lonely. Yeah. Old age is kind of what I'm recognizing. So I'm trying to slow down a little bit on the pieces that are important and matter and you know, be patient in those moments. Yeah.
Yeah, it's such an interesting, you look at like a high-end sports car, and we always talk about how quickly it can go from 0 to 60, right, is the measurement, but we can't forget that those high-end sport cars also have incredible brake systems, and they can slow down just as fast, if not faster, than they can speed up. But we never talk about that part of a high-end sports car. And so I in no way, I don't think you have to choose to be patient or impatient or urgent or non-urgent. I think the thing I've appreciated about this conversation is it's just being aware, really, because I in no way, I don't want to stop pushing. I find great joy in pushing and growing and thinking outside the box and having our people like push it to the limit sometimes because they experience and learn new things about themselves. Yeah. But I never want to do it at the detriment of somebody, myself, my family, or someone's feelings. And I think it is a fine balance on figuring out how to do both sides of that.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's definitely a balance, and I think that there's people that move rapidly and with urgency, and quite frankly, that creates a lot of opportunity. Yeah. You know, I think that your fast pace creates opportunity. Yeah. And it creates a path. Sometimes it's at least a big aftermath that I'm like, oh, hear it. Don't worry. Like I'm on storm cleanup today, Marcus. So that creates sometimes some chaos behind it. Yeah. And at the same time, I think that typically when we talk about being impatient or patient or whatever, it's like, we're not like impatient in the line at the store going, can't move faster, you know, you're just like, oh, it is what it is. Yeah. Be in the line and go with it. And then knowing when, I think it's just recognizing that and kind of knowing when you got to slow down and when you got to speed up and how to, I think for me, it's like creating the vision and being present where you're going. And
awesome. Well, I'm going to come back to you in 1 second for any wrap-ups or ahas that you have, but let's wrap up the conversation. Enchilada Nation, the reason I love these type of conversations where it's not necessarily a big topic or necessarily a big point that we're making from a business standpoint or an application standpoint, but I think it's important for us to slow down and be vulnerable about like just recognizing the impact and energy we're bringing to the table. And not from a critical standpoint. Like there's enough negative voices going on in your head. There's enough haters out in the world. That's not the point for you to do that on yourself, but it is important to be aware and self-aware and slow down enough. And having good people in the world like Russie is with me that we can like open up and have these conversations and say, hey, am I showing up weird this way? I can't tell you how many times I've asked Russie to like, hey, am I not showing up as a leader in this way? Or, hey, am I having a negative impact on people with this way? And I need somebody I can trust to either verify or contradict the voice that's going on in my head. So I invite you to just slow down once in a while and be vulnerable with yourself and be like, well, where am I showing up well? Or what served me well and where does it serve me negatively? And just be aware of both sides of it so that you can start counteracting that. And a lot of that helps having someone in your world that you can chat through that with. So if a lot of you I know are very fast-paced entrepreneurs, kick butt, go get things done in a world that needs that energy right now, but don't leave a wake behind you always without at least understanding the wake you're leaving and a game plan of how are you making sure the people in your world are taken care of. They know your intent, they know your vision, they know where you're going, they know when you're pushing urgent, they want to push urgently with you. And they also have the power to slow you down when your world needs to slow down for you and your family. So those are kind of my ahas from the conversation. Anything you want to add to that, Russie?
Oh gosh, I think you nailed it. But for me, it's just, I think it really does go back to being really aware of the energy that you're bringing with it.
Yep.
And really kind of owning that in a way that you're not owning and just going, what do you know? What do you want from me?
Yeah.
I'm impatient and moving fast, right? But like knowing your audience, bringing the energy, creating the vision, and then moving forward and being aware of it.
Awesome.
I think you nailed everything else. So.
Good. Well, Thank you for everything you do for me and for the friendship. And thanks for being a guest again.
Of course,
This is fun.
yeah, it's great.
Yeah. All right, Enchilada Nation, don't forget, go live life on your terms.